Hi, my name is Robin. I work for Seabourn as their Vice President of Expedition Operations. And today I'd like to, in conjunction with our partner Panache Cruises, really talk to you about, in my opinion, the greatest destination there is on Earth to visit with an expedition ship, and that being Antarctica. I've taken many guests to Antarctica as expedition leader. I've probably done 80 to 100 trips down to Antarctica. It really is a magnificent place. And what's always interesting is when you meet guests at a later stage somewhere else, they always come to you and almost the same words repeated identically. Best trip of my life is what people refer to Antarctica. It really is something quite special. I know as an expedition leader, I would always brief guests on the first day and say to guests, we're heading down to Antarctica. Every holiday after this will be dull in comparison. And guests always laugh about it. But then at the end of the 10 days in Antarctica, it sinks in and they realize that that actually is quite true. It's a destination that changes you. It moves you. It is something quite special. Typically speaking, there are different types of trips down to Antarctica. You have your standard 10-day Antarctica that leaves Ushuaia. It spends 2 days at sea. And those 2 days at sea are active 2 days at sea. You're out on the back deck all day with the expedition staff. You're watching southern giant petrels. You're watching the prions. You're watching the pintadas. You're watching, wandering albatrosses fly past you at eye level on the very large open aft deck area that Seaborne Venture has, because we know how important it is. So we designed and built a ship that has a lot of open deck spaces for these incredible wildlife encounters. And then on hand, you have the expedition staff who will be interpreting. You've, of course, got your pair of Swarovski binoculars. We have a partnership with Swarovski, and every single suite on board has a pair of Swarovski binoculars that you can use. So, we're looking for whales. We're looking for bird life. Those 2 days are quite busy. We're doing briefings about Antarctica. There's zodiac briefings, IATA briefings, wildlife briefings. There's a lot going on before we get you ready and prepare you for this incredible destination. Beyond the 10-day, there are additional sailings where if you wanted to later in the season, you could join us on a 13-day Antarctica sailing. This takes you further down the peninsula past the Antarctic Circle. It allows you to explore Antarctica in greater detail, and it allows the ship and gives the ship more flexibility to really explore north, south, east, west, and all the areas around the peninsula. Beyond that, we have our longer 21-day sailing, which leaves Ushuaia. We have a day at sea. We then explore the northwestern section of the Falklands. Very few people realize how incredibly rich in terms of wildlife the Falkland Islands are. So many people just think of the Falklands as Stanley with a bit of, history in terms of war and things like that. But the Falklands is home to about 65% of all black-browed albatrosses in the entire world. And you can come ashore on these islands and see 3-4 different penguin species. You can see these magnificent breeding areas where black-browed albatrosses are on their nests. And then later in the season, you can see them with their chicks and how they're teaching them to fly. And this is the kind of thing the average person only ever sees on a documentary on TV. And you can be literally a couple of meters away from watching a black-browed albatross teach its chick how to fly and take off and land on the nest. It's really something quite special. Of course, we do go to Stanley. From there, we have 2 days at sea, and then we head over to South Georgia. South Georgia is incredible. Most people fall in love with Antarctica, but South Georgia actually becomes the highlight of their destination. And we'll talk a little bit more about South Georgia in a minute. And then, of course, we have 2 days at sea, and we spend about 6 days on the peninsula exploring Antarctica, doing 2 landings a day or a landing, a Zodiac cruise, repositioning over lunch. There is no set itinerary in Antarctica, and that's what's great about it. Many of the destinations on expedition ships, like the Arctic, like Antarctica, like other destinations, like the Amazon, for example, you'll see we have what's called the Seabourn Antarctic experience. And what that is, it's an itinerary where we give the captain and the expedition leader the freedom, and we leverage their knowledge about these destinations to really maximize every single day. They look at the weather, they look at ice charts, they look at conditions, and they make a judgment call based on all of those things as to what's going to be the best experience. So every single day, that itinerary is massaged based on what we've just seen, based on what we'd still like to see. We want to make sure we see all 3 penguin species. We want to make sure we get to the Antarctic continent. We want to make sure that you see tabular icebergs, that you visit a research station. So we really want to see that you have this full rounded Antarctic experience and get to see everything that's possible on the Antarctic Peninsula. So the itinerary is not set, it changes, and it's very much determined by weather, wildlife, and ice conditions. And so, you know, a typical day, we may have a Zodiac operation in the morning, do a Zodiac landing, come in a short Cookville Island, looking at one of the largest Gentoo rookeries down in Antarctica, simultaneously multiple kayaking departures, submarine departures, reposition over lunch, get into the back of Paradise Bay, Zodiac cruise, multiple kayak departures, submarine departures, get back on board the ship. And that's not the end of the day. We then look at recap and briefing, where we round up the day, any questions, talk about our plans for the next day. And then that evening, we're going to look at scenic cruising, the Herrera Channel, the Nurmire Channel, the Gerlache. So all these areas, we're looking for killer whales, humpback whales. We're going to be in the back of Wilhelmina Bay looking for, you know, maybe whales, humpback whales, bubblenet feeding. So with the 24 hours of light, guests are kept exceptionally busy in Antarctica because, you know, you're there for a time period and you want to see as much as you possibly can. So very, very special, a fantastic area, from the icebergs to the penguins, to the mountains. It's like nothing else anyone has ever seen before. Obviously, with Seabourn Venture, we have 8 double kayaks. So we have multiple kayaking departures, allowing almost every single guest to go kayaking over a 6-day period down in Antarctica. But coming back to South Georgia is special. It has incredible dramatic scenery. It's got the mountains, it's got the tundra. It's also geographically positioned just inside the Antarctic convergence. So it benefits from all the rich nutrient waters that Antarctica has, but it doesn't freeze over. So it is an absolute hub of wildlife because there's always open access to the ocean. So for example, you've got millions of king penguins, fur seals, you've got albatrosses nest in there, you've got glaciers, you've got the fantastic whaling history, you've got the Shackleton story. It really has so much to offer. And of course, it's scenes like this where a guest comes ashore at Salisbury Plain and they think the beach is the highlight because there's a few thousand king penguins and there's fur seals and there's elephant seals, and you have southern giant petrels swooping along the shoreline looking to see where they can feed. And you think that's the highlight. And you tell guests to walk just 100 meters over a very gentle incline. And as they come over the ridge, there are 250,000 pairs of king penguins staring at you. This is a sight and a sound guests will never, ever forget. And this is repeated at multiple landing sites in South Georgia, Gold Harbor, St. Andrews. Beyond that, you've also got chin straps, you've got gentoos, you've got rock hoppers, macaronis. South Georgia is this incredible hub of wildlife and really is something quite special. My recommendation, if you have the time, join us for the full 21 days down to Antarctica. It is the greatest, most comprehensive Southern Ocean expedition you can do, and it really is something quite special. My recommendation, is reach out to Panache Cruises, our partner, and look at talking to them to book a trip with us, either on the 10, the 13-day, or the 21-day trip down to Antarctica.